This week on Behind the Pulpit, we are once again joined by another one of our world partners who is here to discuss her ministry overseas.
I'm living in Austria and I'm working with people in prostitution from an Asian background.
Along with an interesting theology sprint, we also take a look into Pastor Bob's dramatic sermon on Nehemiah chapter 13.
Hulk-like. Give me a Hulk pose. In fact, turn to your neighbor and just go, Hulk!
Before we jump into the podcast today, we just would like to let you know that due to the ministry of our guests today, some of the topics and news stories we discuss today are for more mature audiences. That being said, we have rated today's podcast as PG-13, so viewer discretion is advised for some of our younger audience members. Other than that, wherever you may be watching or listening to this today, we hope you're having a wonderful day. And as always, sit back, relax, and enjoy this week's edition of Behind the Pulpit.
Greetings, Internet world. We are here for our weekly Behind the Pulpit podcast. It is November 20th, 2023. My name is Dave Henschel, lead pastor of Preaching, Spiritual Formation, and Care. And I'm here with two special friends today. The first one's a usual contributor to Behind the Pulpit.
I love that I'm one of your special friends. Thank you for introducing me that way. Bob Urbig, lead pastor for Preaching, Family Life, and Mission. Happy to be here today, and it is 8:20 in the morning, so we're recording earlier than usual. I got my Dunkin' fixed today. Those of you out there that always come up to me and say, "Do you like Dunkin' or Starbucks?" Today, it's Dunkin'. So
not a sponsor, though.
There you go. That's we have to say that. Not an advertising sponsor.
Speaking of Dunkin',
if we get more subscribers, they might have to be a unbeknownst sponsor of the show. We'll see.
Speaking of Dunkin', yesterday's parking situation was so abysmal that my daughter called me from Dunkin' saying, "Dad, there's nowhere to park at the church. Can you come pick me up down the road?" Yeah, at the first service, there was people on the lawn. There was just nowhere to go, and she was like 45 minutes late to her youth Sunday school class. Yeah, so.
Well, I don't know. You can park down there and run. I've done it. Get here in about 5 minutes.
Well, Felicity, Pastor Bob has some advice for you next week.
Run with my kids down there all the time.
So Duncan's getting a pretty good shout out today. But we are here with a special guest. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Faith. I'm in overseas work with World Venture, and I have been supported by you guys here at Millington since, I think, 2020. So I'm excited to be here today. This is my first foray into podcasting. And I am going to have to avoid a few specific words just because this is on the internet. So if that strikes you as strange, that's the reason.
Oh, the internet, right?
Thank you for that clarification.
People say all kinds of things on the internet, but apparently there is some things we can't say. So we need to be careful about that. Yeah. So, thanks for being here, Faith.
Bob, what is World Venture for those of us who may not know what that organization does and
World Venture,
what she just referenced?
World Venture is a great organization. They are well, since you're using overseas worker, we have a lot of world partners that go out and do work for Jesus. Is that okay? Can I say that? All right, they go out to work for Jesus all around the world and locally. But we are really proud to partner with World Venture. You can, of course, go to their website and read more about them, or go to our website and you can see all the different people that we support through them.
Yeah, so we're so excited. Thank you, Faith, for waking up early and doing this podcast with us. We're excited to partner with you, and we're excited to hear from you today as well. But first, a couple things that are coming up in the life of our church. It is holiday season. And so we want to draw your attention to a few upcoming events. The first one that we want to talk about is the upcoming Winter Village event. That is Sunday this year, not Saturday, December 17th, 5 p.m. It's got all the usual stuff. Bring the family. We've got a lit up tree. We've got fire pits. We've got s'mores. We've got a food truck. We've got a petting zoo. We've got the Shadow Box Theater this year, which is a new element. We're looking forward to how that's going to go. So come see the show. Caroling, brass. It's just a great time to hang out with the family right before the Christmas season.
But before we go on, can we have a moment of review of the Winter Village promo video that was in the service yesterday?
All right. So
I think people cheered at the end.
You know, I forgot we were doing that, and I came in because I was teaching an adult class, and I came in like, Pastor Dave, that was pretty good video. I'm like, oh man.
I will say
today was the day with that.
Cinematography wise, I think it was our best one. It left, at least for me as the producer of the video, the ending wasn't how we wanted. I won't go into details on that. because it has fueled the fire for
Snow
next
Machine
year's
Gate.
video. My brother and I are already in the works of scripting out next year's Winter Village promo as a sequel to this one. So
A sequel of this one. Okay. Well,
So I think it was-
speaking
I
of
But we
Yes,
did
good.
get Pastor Bob in war
You
paint.
become
He
a
did. Well,
franchise.
I know, but you know what? We were talking later on. Speaking of, she was asking me about political topics before. He wanted me to wear the red and green war paint, which I realized later is like Palestinian colors. So we had to be careful.
Right.
I was like, we got to take that out, you know,
Oh,
Yeah.
mercy.
for this one. Anyway,
I
timing.
think we can use red and green without necessarily saying anything politically.
Not even
I
think
don't know.
about
You
that.
never know. You never know nowadays.
Speaking
Dave.
of colors, can we just look at Faith's socks for a second? I mean, that is awesome.
Can we
that
see
is-
it? Oh my goodness!
I need-
the camera's in the way. I
I
can't
need
fully
to
see them.
up my sock game. That's pretty
Dave,
cool.
The other week, Dave was he's trying to reach through the monitors over there.
We
to
have a
lower down.
producer
Yeah.
that does it all. He does
Yeah.
video skits. He moves cameras to socks. He's just all over the place.
Here we go.
so.
Here it comes. There it is. All right.
Yes,
The socks.
yes.
And are those Uggs? What are those?
Yes, these are a contribution from my sister who lives in the north.
Nice.
So I get my warm shoes from her.
She lives up in the Northern Territories,
Yes.
way
We
up
talk
there.
about how lame Dave's socks are comparatively. All right.
I'm
so
actually wearing ankle socks. You can just.
I can
I'll
only
just be
see his
I'll be showing
ankles.
leg if you.
That's
get
not
over here.
appropriate for a church podcast.
So those socks are getting me in the mood for the holidays. It is
right.
the week
Winter Village.
Week
Winter Village.
before it is.
Yeah.
It is the week before Thanksgiving. So this is a time in our lives where we express gratitude, a Christian virtue that we look back to the God of heaven and gives thanks for all He has done for us and all He is. Any Thanksgiving plans for you guys this
I
week?
do. You know, actually, Tim, can you pull up slide 24 on that slide 14 and 15 on that slide deck I sent you. This is what I was thinking about with Thanksgiving. I found this. It was just amazing.
I did laugh at that. That was very funny.
Some of you actually know, but growing up, my I think literally it was for Thanksgiving dinner. The dog that my parents had, somebody left the room. He jumped up and I think he ate like. I think he went up dying as a result.
there's a
He ate all the food and he goes over stuff.
Oh, that's a dark end.
Man, this segment is not
There's
going the
a,
direction I was thinking. We
there's
got
a-
angry cats. We got dying dogs. I was trying to be thankful to God.
Maybe
Well,
they
here we
didn't
are.
like the dog.
Oh,
There's
my
a picture
word.
that my brother took of me a couple years ago on Thanksgiving, and everyone's left the table, and I'm just sitting there, just like sitting contently. Maybe I'll put it up in post production. But it's a pretty funny
Tim, I want to
picture.
see that.
No, but Thanksgiving's gonna be good. I don't know. You know what?
Was there another slide you had? You said you had two.
Yeah. Going along with the sermon, I had the angry turkey slide there, slide 15. That's
you
the
go.
question for this morning. This could actually be your
T-shirt?
well, yeah, but the title you give for the episode, the angry turkey.
Yeah.
Who's the angry turkey?
Got a prepared penguin and an angry turkey now.
That's right. It's all about the spiritual warfare, man.
All right. So back to the question. You guys doing anything special this week for Thanksgiving?
I'm going to be at our house. We're hosting. My mom and sister are coming over. And I did manage to get the shop right in enough time to get a small enough turkey to only feed 5 people.
Oh, so you want a smaller one? Well,
Well,
how,
you
how
know,
many
well,
pounds
well,
is small?
here's
Like,
what
what's-
happens,
what's
though.
small?
Well, we only got the turkey breast, and it's about 7 pounds. But here's the
just the
thing: though,
breast,
if
okay.
you're not having a big gathering and you're gonna need a lot of food, and you're only having a small gathering, if you don't go early enough to get the free turkey from all the shopping you've done at ShopRite over the last year,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to get stuck with like a 25-pound turkey because everybody's getting the smaller ones, and then we're going to be eating turkey for the next year, basically.
You're
How's
such
that
a
problem?
planner.
It
Yeah.
wasn't planned. I went in one day. I was like, you know what? I think we should get Thanksgiving food, and I did it. Me and Zoe, we went and found it all. We got the turkey, we got the gravy, we got the stuffing, we got the cranberry sauce.
I feel like Faith is asking you a very sorted, very
Oh, I
good
didn't know what
question
you-
here.
what'd you
She
ask?
said, "Why is this a problem?"
Eating
What-
turkey all year.
Yeah.
Yes. How is this problematic? You have a freezer.
Okay, but I don't want to sleep. You know, when you have turkey, you fall asleep all the time. They got the whatever that tofurkin or whatever is
Tryptophan.
tryptophan. There you go. Whatever's in turkey. you just
Tofurducken
sleep.
is different than tryptophan.
Become like
Oh, my
narcoleptic
word.
all the time.
So Faith and I will eat the leftovers. If you have anything, we're game.
Yeah, you just have a cup of coffee
Yeah.
with
All right.
your turkey sandwich.
What we
Okay.
usually do is buy the little buns and have later that evening turkey sandwiches, and then the next day our family tradition is to do turkey a la king, which is like those dumplings in turkey, kind of like,
Ooh.
and then by Saturday,
Okay.
we're ready for like Mexican food. We're
Yeah.
kind of done, but
See, so you were asking us, what do we cover on the? This is the type of stuff we talk about on this podcast. We
Yeah.
talk about turkey and food.
I'm totally okay with that. I don't think any churches will split over this,
yeah.
Well, you never know.
although they're the ham eaters.
Well, happy Thanksgiving,
There's
everybody.
different views on communion, which involves food. So
Oh,
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. I'm pulling the reins back in on the show, so it's going to be a great great turkey day. We'll see if we can move on. So a couple things coming up in the life of our church as we think about the holidays. We are almost finished with our Ezra Nehemiah series. It's been a blessing, Pastor Bob, to go back into the post-exilic books and hear
I'm a
the
little sad
story
to
of
leave Ezra and
restoration.
Nehemiah.
I am
Yeah.
too. It's a great job finishing chapter 13. We'll get into that in a second. But we're looking forward to diving into the Gospel of Luke. And it's always a reminder to me in the Old Testament of how there are wonderful stories of God at work in his people, but ultimately they always end in disappointment. We are really not looking for Ezra. We're not looking for Nehemiah. Those are not the leaders that are going to take us to where we need to go in the redemptive story. We're looking for someone else. We're looking for someone greater. We're looking for the new and better Nehemiah, the one who leaves the great palace and comes down to be with his people. And that's what the Gospel of Luke is all about. So it's a great segue into the Advent season. Next, we have a couple things coming up in December. Christmas Eve is on a Sunday this year, so heads up about that. We are going to have a traditional worship service Sunday morning. And
If you weren't paying attention, it might sneak up on you. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, Sunday. It's
Yeah.
Christmas Eve, too.
What do we do? Well, here's an idea. Go to church. Sunday morning, it's 10 a.m. We have our fourth Sunday of Advent. We will light the candle of love, and then the evening services will be our traditional candlelight services. Look forward to that. So mark your calendars. Invite a friend. It's a great time to invite a friend.
So
to
no
Millington.
Christmas Eve this year. We're taking a year off.
Yep. So
Just sticking with Sunday.
maybe it'll be back next time, but for
Who
this
knows?
year, this is
Who
what we're
knows?
trying. And then also something fun that we do in December that's for a great cause is Cookies for a Cause. So if you're a baker and you want to contribute to this event, you can bake from home and then drop off your cookies December 8th or early December 9th, and then we'll pack those up and send them to our strategic local partners in order to bless them with Cookies for a Cause this year. So that's what we got going on for this month, I believe. Is there any more things we wanted to highlight, Tim? Did I forget anything? Oh, yeah, one more thing. Same morning as Cookies for a Cause, we're going to have a men's breakfast coming up with a couple
Are
powerful
those potatoes
testimonies.
or beans? What is that in the middle there?
I believe those are beans.
Yes.
My goodness. That's going to
We've got a
be
little...
bad news if everybody's having that right there.
Whatever I try to
threw
do,
you
you
off,
try to... The car... No, let's take the car off-road over here.
If you asked me at the beginning, who's driving the...
Why do we
who's
want to
driving the
drive on
car?
the smooth stuff? Why don't we just go over here where it's bumpy and really
the
rocky?
Lord gave us bodies. It's fine.
It's fine. Yes.
And he created
Yeah.
beans.
We can talk
There you
about
go.
such things. Yeah. And for some
All right.
reason, our digestive system can't fully handle
That's
them, so we
true.
have
All
to
right.
do other things with them. All right.
Well,
so
with that being said, Faith, let's talk to you now. All right. Do you mind if I take the wheel for a second? Fully?
please,
Like,
you
All
or
right.
Jesus take the wheel. Somebody
Jesus,
take the wheel.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we mentioned before we have we support a number of what we call world partners, and Faith is one of them. And so when they come through and they share a bit about their ministries, we do want to try to have them on here as much as possible to give you an extended time to share about what the Lord is doing through you. So would you mind telling folks a little bit more about who you are, what you do, that is acceptable to the YouTube overlords as we move on here?
So I'm living in Austria, and I'm working with people in prostitution from an Asian background. So that's going to involve a lot of hospitality, and hospitality can be shown in different ways. Sometimes you invite them into your own home, which we love to do, but it also involves going out and showing the friendliness of God, which is kind of a theme for this year. So the German translation of that verse from Psalm 34 that says, "Taste and see the goodness of God." The German word is Freundlichkeit, which I like much better as a translation. Just for me, I don't, you guys are original texters. I have not looked at the original text. I just deal with translations in.
You got the Hebrew word for that one, Dave?
I have to look that one up. Taste and see.
Yeah.
But I'm impressed with the German accent and everything. Are you fluent?
There you go.
Yeah,
Oh my
I'm
gosh.
not. I'm
Oh,
not
good.
perfect, but I am.
And
fluent.
Chinese too, or just
Yeah.
or Mandarin rather, I should say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I actually I memorized that verse in Mandarin yesterday because I thought it would be kind of fun because I spoke at a group last night, and then I panicked because there were also 2 people in the group who spoke Mandarin. I was like, oh, now's the test. Now's the test.
We do have some
feel-
Mandarin folks
I
here.
feel-
You got
I
to
feel-
watch it.
They were wonderful. I
Good.
really enjoyed talking.
I'm
with
feeling
them.
a little
Thanks for going to that.
woeful shame right now that I only know one language at this table. So
You only need the one, and you know it so
We
much
need the
better.
We need the
yeah,
one.
well, Greek and Hebrew.
What an encourager. We need the one. That's cool work that you're doing. Tell us more.
So yeah, that is going to involve a lot of, like, I think a lot of times in terms of how Jesus walked among us, and there's a big focus on his healing of our souls, which is, of course, I would say his main focus, but it is a focus where you see it combined with the healing of our bodies. He treated people as a whole. He saw them where they were in their context and used their language. And he comes to us, wearing people clothes. Like, he spoke the language that the people were speaking at the time, and he made himself uncomfortable. He went through puberty. He grew a beard. He, he navigated the religious and political vicissitudes of the time. And
Vicissitudes.
Whoa.
Tim, we have another competing
There
title
it is.
for
Vicissitudes.
what's the
Well,
German
she talked
word
about
for
Jesus
vicissitude?
growing a beard.
I can't give you that.
Jesus growing a beard and then having it pulled out later on the cross.
Yes.
We'll come back to that.
Isaiah 50.
By the way, that did elicit a beard pulling in your service. I was
Did it?
staying with the Torgrimsons,
Oh,
and
dear.
their
He doesn't have a
granddaughter
beard.
pulled on their father's beard, their granddaughter.
Yeah.
And he was like, ow.
Oh, no.
So what you're saying is
Avoidable
the physical
consequences.
ministry should not be demoted or devalued or let's say depreciated or somehow not emphasized because we're interested in spiritual things, but the physical ministry can be the context and the foundation and the means by which Jesus, God, gets to do the soul work as well. So these things
Yes.
should not be separated.
Yeah, I think of 2 specific verses. Let your light shine before men so that they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven. But the other aspect, 3 verses actually, because another one is the goodness of God leads us to repentance. It is not, the judgment of God and the part where he leaves you in your corner because you deserve what you put yourself in, that leads you to repentance. It's his grace. It's his kindness. And the other one that I think of is that very strange parable about the crafty steward who, do you guys know that? Of course, you're pastors.
I think we're going to study Luke pretty soon, right? It's
Oh,
in
you're
there.
going to
Coming
get
up,
to it.
yeah.
So can you give us a few months and then but you can give us a
come
little snapshot. What in the world is he talking
Of course,
about?
familiar with it, haven't studied it recently. So
Yeah.
Well, so
it's a
he's-
weird one.
Yeah, he
So
finds
don't ask
out-
me about the Greek words in it.
I will not. I will not. That is also not a language I feel comfortable. You guys would be on your own in that discourse. But so Jesus is talking about this steward who finds out he's going to get fired. And so he goes around and he takes his master's goods and he distributes them in different houses. And he's like, here, take this and take this and take this. Because what he's doing is creating favor for himself for when he's in need. And Jesus, praises him for this weird self-serving behavior where he's also, he's kind of stealing his master's stuff. But he says, how is it that the people of the world, that the sons of the world are more wise than the sons of light? Therefore, make friends for yourself using unrighteous mammon, filthy mammon, or, wealth, material things. And he's talking about it in terms of using all of the resources that God has given us in his kingdom to show the aspects of God's goodness and to, you're doing your winter festival, you have your pretty Christmas tree, you have these different things. We don't need to be wearing black hats with buckles and go back to, the days of no play acting or puppets. Like we get to walk in the abundance of Christ. We believe in how he uses all the different things to help people and to show his goodness. So it's a weird parable. I don't know if that made sense at all, but it's one I think of.
So I was going to, one of the things when you shared your story and the last time you were here, I was reminded of, and I told you the first time, when I first came here, I was the youth pastor. Tim was in my youth group for a few years back there.
Oh, ho.
The first mission trip I did, and I did a couple while I was here, we went to Chicago, and the group that we worked with, they had a ministry where you would go out to the prostitutes on the street. I think it was called the Rose of Sharon ministry, and that trip was. I have a lot of thoughts about that trip.
They let you guys do street work as like a short term.
Well, they did. I don't know that we actually did that on that trip because there was a lot of things that didn't go as I would have liked on that trip. But I do know they have that ministry, and I think you had to have some. The kids might have had to be a certain age, which they weren't at the time, so some of them were not able. I think you had to be over 18 or something. I had more kids that were underneath 18. But anyway, the reason I'm saying it is because it made me think that is such a not easy thing to do, and is something you wouldn't normally think of somebody who's going out and doing the work that you do doing, if I can say it that way. Well, my question is, how did you get into this? How did the Lord lead you into actually ministering to this type of people group?
A lot of times, especially when I talk to younger people who are standing at the cusp of big decisions, I get asked that question because it's a burning question. How do you, find the will of God? Which is definitely terminology that I used to consider, but I don't actually think now that we find the will of God, or that that's something that he wants us to feel a lot of pressure about doing. He wants us to abide in him, and he will walk us through the next step that goes to the next step. The will of God finds you as you walk with God. So, that as my backstory, and I wish I'd known that when I was 19 and was flipping out about it. But I ended up through a series of events in an Asian country, working among homeless people there, and I loved the work. But I remember I had been thinking a lot about people who were experiencing commercial sexual exploitation. And I was thinking about how often they appear in the Bible. And there is a verse where Jesus, he's done something fantastic. I don't remember what he's done, but he does something fantastic, and the disciples are flipping out, and they're like, oh, this is crazy. And he says, don't think that this is strange that I've done these things. Why are you marveling at this? He said, these things that I'm doing, you're going to go do those things too, and even greater things. And that verse still challenges me, because I don't think I would be like, oh, I'm doing greater things than Jesus. I'm like, what does that even mean? But, if we take him seriously, we wrestle with these passages, and we try and figure out what was he driving at there. And so I found myself, wrestling with that passage. And I asked, I was like, well, what was Jesus doing? What were the works that he was doing? Well, he was ruining his reputation by spending a disproportionate amount of time with people that, no self-respecting rabbi would go party with. That was really what he was doing. He was hanging out with the tax collectors, the people who were considered, collaborators with the regime of wickedness that was going on with the oppressors. He was going over and having dinner with
the original IRS agents, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. But even worse, because we still kind of sometimes like our government. We do vote and stuff, but they were the invaders. True. Imagine that
you didn't get a choice back in the day.
No, a foreign nation had come over and was like, pay tax. Well, and everybody complains about paying taxes for things they don't like. That's anyway. Yeah. So he was hanging out also, though, with a disproportionate number of people in prostitution, or women who were on the edge of that. I would say at risk. He did both. Like a Mary Magdalene. Yeah, type, and people that have demoniacs. When you're working with people that have a lot of mental issues, whether it's demonic or mental, in some other way, these are fringe groups of people that he was spending time with, and so I was like, but I don't even know anybody who is in prostitution. I couldn't think of anyone that I'd ever met that I was aware of. And I was like, well, okay. So it was a thing I started to pray for and pray about. And then I was traveling in the South in Asia with a friend. And I remember we ended up getting to know these Buddhist butchers. And which is a funny contrast in terms. And after we'd hung out for a while, I was like, so you're a Buddhist butcher. Are you concerned about this? Because you're supposed to not take life, and the lives that you take, you will have to, you will be subject to retribution for. Yeah. And they were like, yeah, we worry about it. But so we were talking with them about this, and they also ran a bar, and we had spent time in this bar, and there was a woman always there. And then over time, we were there for, several days, I was like, oh, this woman is prostituting in this bar. She was very young. I was early 20s at the time, and she was younger than me. I don't know how old she was, but so after we had spent time, I said, well, can you guys talk to me about this? Like, how do you feel about having this woman prostituting in this bar? And she was like, what?
It's an interesting question.
Well, we had already covered other topics. We'd spent a lot of time together, and they were really lovely. Like, we had a wonderful time with them. And they said, well, if you don't have a girl, people aren't going to come to your bar. So it's kind of the thing that's expected. That was their first thing. But the second thing they said, they were like, this woman supports her whole family. She comes from a small minority group, and she's here, and the money that she makes, she sends back. And I thought to myself, gosh, like, what am I going to do? Like, my language skills were not very developed at that time. I was still just at the very beginning stages of working among homeless, and I was learning a lot from local partners, honestly. Like, I was not really doing much helping. I was learning.
Wow.
And I was like, what am I going to do with this woman? Am I going to go up and be like, well, that's kind of bad. You should quit doing that. Like, am I going to say, come back with me to my town and we'll figure out a whole new life when I'm barely functional myself? She's on the list of people that I have failed to help, that I think about, but God used her nonetheless in my life to start me thinking about not just, prostitution is bad. Okay. And to start thinking, Jesus is the way out. He is the way, the truth, and the life. What way would he make for a person in this position? And do I believe that God is capable of dealing with that complex cocktail of social and spiritual
system?
That has entrapped this young woman.
Well, it's interesting. So you're saying basically that this woman was engaged in this lifestyle for the purpose of making money and sending it back to her family.
Yeah.
To take care of them.
Yeah.
And this was the type of work that she felt she needed to do in order to accomplish that.
Well, I mean, the prostituting population doesn't set out and think, I'd love to. Like, no little girl's like, this is what I will do when I grow up. And no little boy thinks that either. Like, it's not a dream that anyone has. And so you have to ask, how did they get, when you see somebody in an adverse
Well, actually,
situation,
I was going to ask you that. How did people come to be where they are in terms of those that you're ministering to?
And it really does depend. I'm currently working with internationally trafficked people. So that's going to be different for each country you're in. Each trafficking route is going to function differently for each people group that you're working with. When I was in,
and it's even a problem in the U.S., right?
Oh, yes.
There's groups around here that work with, people getting abducted and put into trafficking and all that. It's a major problem.
Yeah, and the pornography industry is actually very closely linked to that. It's an entertainment industry, right? So you're not going to want to look behind the mask and be like, why is this individual in this position? And instead you think, oh, well, they've put themselves in here. I paid for it. So, and I'm not really hurting anybody. You're not thinking about the psychological damage. You're not thinking about the social damage that you're creating through that. And you're not even thinking about the damage that's happening in your own mind and relationship.
And that's, again, an interesting tie between what you're talking about and pornography. And pornography is a major problem as well as this trafficking thing.
It's
people like to think that it's anonymous and there's no consequences to, like, nobody knows that I'm doing it, but there's a consequence because there's people in the videos that...
They're real humans. They're real humans, and they're afraid that people will find out who they are. And not all of those people, by the way, this is a trafficking technique. There were women that we worked with in Asia who got into it because they met somebody who drugged them at a train station or in a specific instance where they gained some trust. And then they woke up naked in a hotel room, and the person said, I have these videos of you. I know where you're from, and I'll show it to your father. Like, if you don't do what I tell you to do. And that is, so don't think that you're just consuming something where no one has been impacted by it, and maybe not for that specific video in all of the ways that you think. But you do not know what is happening. Respect the image of God in that person. And think about, would you like your daughter to do it? Would you like to be a person who is only known as a set of body parts cut up for somebody else to look at? Like, it's just, so there is definitely a link. And there's also a link, incidentally, I don't want to go too dark, but in shaping our tastes, pornography shapes the sexual tastes of a culture. And many customers will go and they'll talk to women in prostitution, and they'll say, and they'll show them pornography, and they'll say, I want you to do this. Or they'll be enacting, you know, like it's their racial stereotypes that are involved. Pornography deals a lot with power dynamics, both racial power dynamics, gender power dynamics. People aren't talking about this. It's sexist and racist, in addition to the other things that we think. Maybe
you should start there, and then people get more attention.
Oh, I do.
On it, you know?
I do. I'm like, I mean, and it's very evident. Even so, we go out. Our group goes out and visits the brothels, bearing gifts, and the brothels are oftentimes divided into ethnic groups, not just because people are more easy to control when you speak that language and they don't speak the other language, but also because people have been trained to expect a different sexual experience from an African person or a Slavic person or an Asian person. Those are racial stereotypes. Anyway, I could go on and on, but it gets real dark. I know this is like
so that might be a good segue.
I was going to segue.
We want to keep hearing from Faith, but there's something that we did want to highlight in our next segment that we'll.
Yeah, do you mind if we take a? You want to take the wheel back and get?
Yeah. So thank you for setting the table there. So there's a couple stories that will fit with our next segment as we take a look at what's been going on in the news. So let's look. All right, it's been a busy week in the news cycle. There's been a lot going on. The first story that we wanted to highlight had to do with this whole topic of the issue of pornography. So Pastor Bob was talking about this a little bit before the show. Can you give us a highlight, a snapshot of why this topic was in the news this week?
Yeah, and Tim, this is slide number 3 on the deck that I sent you. So this is, by the way, if you want to catch up on important topics from a Christian worldview, Breakpoint is a great resource for you to subscribe to and check them out. So this was one that they came up with. The title was "Avoiding Porn is Weird to the World." Good. So this was in the news because the new House Speaker, which it took a month to elect Mike Johnson, but he's the House Speaker. And his son he's a committed Christian, so this is why this was kind of a deal in the news. New House Speaker and his son use accountability app to stay off porn, and Rolling Stone thinks that's odd. So if you were actually to listen to the article or you were to find it, basically Mike Johnson and his teenage son, I think it's teenage son, use Covenant Eyes, which you may have heard is an accountability software that a lot of people use to keep from looking at porn. And this is how they voice it in the article. So recently, a Rolling Stone magazine reported on an emerging scandal involving the new House Speaker of the House of Representatives. Not financial corruption, not an illicit affair, not ties to foreign power. No, it turns out that Mike Johnson and his son use Covenant Eyes to keep each other accountable about pornography on the internet. And according to Rolling Stone, this is weird.
All right.
So
I actually read that Rolling Stone article last week.
All right. Well, tell us about it. What did Rolling Stone have to say?
It was disturbing.
Why would you do this?
The writers of this Rolling Stone article were so taken aback by this evangelical leader in Congress, and regardless of your political viewpoint, we're not getting political here, but they were completely marginalizing this person because of their commitment to faith in so many different ways. They don't think that our country's on a trajectory that would be problematic for people who follow God. They don't understand anything about where he's coming from, and just to say about pornography like this is kind of weird that you would even have an issue with this, just speaks to how very different the writers of Rolling Stone feel about this issue than
So
really
was their argument basically why would you not want to look at porn? Is that what the point they were making, or why should anybody
what's
care?
the problem? And I think, Faith, you were just talking about this mindset earlier. It's not hurting anybody. Like, this is what Rolling Stone thinks. It's weird that you would even have a problem with this. So tell us, why is this like behavior a problem?
That's interesting. Why is porn bad?
I guess we need to go back to square one.
But
here.
you know what? It's we sort of assume that, but people don't think about the depths. I think that you're giving us a really thought out term. You're giving us a really thought out opinion based on people that you're working with.
Well, yeah, and I also think about things in terms of respect, the way humans treat each other. And if I am reducing somebody to something that I can take from them in that moment, I'm dehumanizing them. I'm thinking about terms. I had this conversation with somebody once about like their own sexual experiences, and they were shocked that my husband and I only slept with each other and we didn't do it before we got married. And that was like, oh,
I know. It's like you're like a unicorn.
Yeah,
nowadays.
yeah. Well, and I have no regrets about that, and neither does he. But I love less baggage. It's great. love not having as much baggage. But we were talking about it, and he said, but you learn so much about yourself through sexual experience. And I was like, but that's very selfish. I don't want you to learn about yourself on my body. Like, maybe the other person is not there for the learning experience. So there's that one aspect.
But I just feel like how
converse,
crazy
I
this
don't really want my
mindset is
spouse
though,
to learn
nowadays.
about their body by someone else's. Like there's
the mindset is like I need practice before I get married.
Well, it's a consumer.
Maybe,
it's a consumer society. That's a consumptive value. And actually, this conversation, although Rolling Stone may appear to be, they feel that they're normal in that, I will say that the conversation is evolving not just among Christians. Many feminists who are considered extreme feminists are anti-pornography, and that's not because of a Christian worldview. Also, there's a writer for the Washington Post who wrote a book I really liked called Rethinking Sexuality, a Provocation. Her name is Christine Emba, and she was talking a lot about pornography and the way is our world moving into a more safe sexuality based off of the very low bar of consent. Is consent really the only bar that we should be considering when we're like, is this fine to do with or to someone, or is it not? And she was talking about the levels of extreme, what would have been considered fringe sexual behavior that now people are like, well, I guess that may just happen occasionally, like including strangulation, not to be whatever, but like that's not. Is this building into a societal good, or are we becoming more brutal? And you really, by the fruits you shall know it. What are the fruits? And so that was kind of. She's not writing from a Christian perspective. She's just she did a lot of interviews with people in the dating world. And when you put things into your soil, your mental soil, you become toxic. These are biblical values, but we're not using Christian terminology. This is a conversation you can have aside from whatever you think about anything that Mike Johnson believes politically or otherwise. Like, Rolling Stone is incorrect if they believe that this is a totally fringe concept.
The writers of Rolling Stone, this was their perspective. Reading it made me think about, if you've ever read the book of Jeremiah, there's these leaders, political leaders, that are his contemporaries that are coexisting with with his prophetic message towards the nation to turn back to God and turn away from evil, and they think Jeremiah is totally crazy, weird. They do not understand where he's coming from. They just don't see why the things that he's denouncing are problematic in the least. And that's it's kind of how the writers of Rolling Stone
when we do
sounded.
that series that we want to do on the prophets, we can just call it weird.
Yeah.
The
prophets were definitely considered to be weird. I mean, didn't everybody think John the Baptist was weird? I mean,
he's my favorite.
Pretty typical of a prophet.
My favorite.
Yeah.
All right. Before we move on from this segment, can I turn to 1 Thessalonians 4, one of the main passages on this? As an exhortation, I think for Christians that maybe have maybe you're a Christian, you don't think it's a big deal. So Paul writes in 1 Thessalonians 4. Starting on verse 2, he says, "For you know what instructions we gave you through the Lord Jesus. This is the will of God, your sanctification," and then specifically, "that you abstain from sexual immorality," which the word there used is porneia, "that each of you know how to control his own body in holiness and honor." And this is what he says. He says, "Not in the passion of lust like the Gentiles who do not know God." Not in the passion of lust like the Gentiles who do not know God. So he's making that sharp contrast that if you are a called out one who follows after Jesus, there should be something different about your life, and specifically, I think, in this area. So kudos for Mike Johnson for doing that, taking some heat, I guess. And Rolling Stone,
we'll pray for you.
We'll pray for you. There you go.
All right. I think there was a second news story
there is,
but
we can, for the sake of time, why don't we save that for when we get into it relates to the sermon a little bit later on.
Okay, good. So Faith talked about this idea, like, is consent, is that low bar really our standard for what does it mean to flourish in an intimate setting? And really the biblical paradigm for flourishing in that way is not consent but covenant. That I'm going to promise to be things for a partner, and they're going to make promises to me. And in that context, really our relationship can flourish. Those are the seeds in the ground that will bear good fruit, right? And the idea of covenant came up in our message this week. So the covenant that we have in marriage between husbands and wives is really reflective of the kind of covenant that we have with our God. And at the end of Nehemiah, the people are making a covenant with God. Many people call it a covenant renewal ceremony, where they are making promises because God has pursued them that they are going to also be faithful to God in return. And at the end of Nehemiah, he's a little angry about the fact that they're not keeping their end of the covenant, that they made promises, but yet these things are falling apart. So Bob, can you tell us a little bit about what Nehemiah 13 is teaching?
Yeah, I can. If you just put up slide number 6, I think this will just tell you what Nehemiah 13 is all about. It's coming up here. All right. Nehemiah 13 he's just all about this right here. Boom.
You're very excited about.
I am. I was going to send Tim the video, but I didn't get permission from my wife. I got my little one to give me a little Hulk impression yesterday.
Cute.
Stay tuned for
okay, so
videos.
Nehemiah is angry, and we'll talk about why he's angry, which you sort of set up there. But can I just add very quickly a little bit of a brief moment of levity here? Can we have a quick debate about who's the best Hulk? This is slide number 5. There was a few different iterations of the Hulk over the years. So we got, I don't know if Dave, we're in the same kind of bracket here. Did you grow up? Did you ever see Lou Ferrigno there on the left?
Yeah, man, prime time. It was right before like A-Team and
A-Team.
Some other classic 80s sitcoms.
I'm sorry,
Walker,
the 80s
Texas
was
Ranger.
the best decade to grow up in. Why do you think Stranger Things is so popular nowadays?
Exactly.
There you go.
Everything's a throwback to the 80s.
They should have the Hulk.
Jams. You had Jams. It was a bad time.
Jams? What's Jams?
Jams. Do you not remember Jams? Maybe it was.
I don't. Maybe I blocked that out of my memory.
It might be actually late 80s, early 90s. There were these.
They're pants that are like
the skid
really
pants?
colorful.
Yes.
Oh, I know what you're talking. Well, okay, so every decade has a little bit of couple. I wasn't into the Jams. I wish I could find a picture.
Zubas.
I did have the Skids pants, which were like not as colorful, but they had
skids.
Yeah, it was like a type of
That sounds
design
like
that
That's a
was
marketing problem.
inappropriate.
That's a marketing problem. We don't want to get too
It wasn't a problem. It wasn't a problem back in the 80s. There
Pastor
you go.
Bob had skids on
All
his
right, so Lou Ferrigno, there was the Eric Bana one, 2003 Ang Lee. Then there was the Edward Norton one, they're number 3. And then the current one that most people know is Mark Ruffalo. He's there on the right. Who is the best Hulk right here? I don't know. It's a running battle between Ferrigno, I think, and Ruffalo right there.
Isn't Ferrigno the only real person?
He was like
These
he just ripped off. He just basically ripped off his shirt and he just put green paint on. Everybody else is CGI.
Him and Arnold Schwarzenegger had like a weightlifting, powerlifting battle in the early
they
80s,
did?
right? They were like serious.
I don't know
man.
These
this.
other guys are just AI, right?
I'm kind of with you
Yeah.
on that. I was actually just looking at that and being like, he's the only one who actually like earned his muscles.
Yes, yeah.
So we'll give
I'm
him
giving
those
it to
points.
Lou.
All right.
I'm going with Lou.
Did he ever use the term Hulk smash?
I don't think so. I think that's a more modern.
Yeah, it might have come in the comics after.
Well, he was a person who
Yeah.
practiced great discipline because he earned his muscles.
that's
so
true.
He was
Everybody
probably,
else is artificial.
Yeah, so he had more
All right.
self-control than the Hulk smashers.
Yeah.
All right, so
All right.
we're inspired by Lou.
Okay, so what Dave was alluding to, this is slide number 9 here. Nehemiah 13:25 is this really kind of in-your-face verse where it just simply says, Nehemiah says, I confronted them and I cursed them and I beat them, some of them, and pulled out their hair. And I remember when we were first going through the book, I'm like, this is such an interesting...
My
I
sister
think that
Laura
was
references
verse, yeah.
this verse many times, and I messaged her yesterday
Did
after
you
your
really?
sermon, and
Okay.
I was like, Laura, the pastor is addressing that verse in Nehemiah, and she was like,
Well, not
is
just
there a way to address it?
It was central. It was the main point of the...
No.
It was
I
really.
would- instead of the Buddhist butchers and having a friendly conversation,
Yeah.
maybe next time you could just storm in and start doing that.
Well, I was feeling super angry with y'all today, and I thought maybe I should just pluck out their beards.
That's right.
You know,
Well,
this is biblical.
my wife will not let me grow a beard, so you have to pluck
For
out
this
Dave's beard.
reason? Is she afraid of
No,
Nehemiah
she just doesn't like
13?
beards. I would grow one, but she says no. I can't do it. So
It was really
that's how
funny.
is.
Earlier in the week, last week, I'm sitting in the office, and Bob walks in with his Bible, and he goes, "Tim, check this out." And he reads Nehemiah 13:25, and he looks at me, he goes, "That's what we're working with this week. You excited?"
Hats off to you. I thought you handled
Oh,
it very well,
man.
and that's the first time I've ever heard that passage actually preached on.
Most people stop at chapter 6. They don't want to go to the end.
It might be the first time it was ever preached on.
It might be. Well, anyway, so
I couldn't believe you were doing that. I was like, Bob, you
actually
can
did
probably
say-
summarize 10, 11, 12. He's like, no, we're going to 13.
This is you do expository preaching. That is
Yeah.
the reason why you do it. Is because you can't skip the weird
know.
ones.
I
he
know.
did. Well, yeah. So, but 10 through 11 and 12 is mostly just names. I'm reading through. It's like here's a list of names. Here's a couple things. Here's a list of longer names. And then the 13 actually had a bit of a like he's coming in and confronting people. So, but I did walk into Dave's office and I said, "Here's a crazy idea. How about I just skip over 10 to 12 and do 13?" And he looked at me and said, "That's the last thing I thought you were going to say when you walked in here right now."
In the spirit of the Rolling Stone authors, I said,
Yeah.
that's weird.
That's is that weird? That's weird. All right, quick summary of this. So basically, Nehemiah is upset because of the covenant unfaithfulness of the people of God, and so he does confront them. And we looked at 4 different things that come up in the passage, and I kind of tied this together with what is it that makes you angry? Because ultimately, we get angry about the things that we love. So Nehemiah is upset because the people of God are hurting themselves, and they are disappointing the Lord himself.
And they all start with F.
And they all start with F. So
Like
we looked
a
at
good
four different
Baptist sermon.
Yes, I
Uh,
noticed.
Yes, we looked at 4 different segments here. So we talked about friends, deceptive friends, mishandled finances, avoidable fatigue, and fighting with our family. So we looked at those 4 different segments this week and kind of broke out why it is those things make us angry and some of the implications of that. And then we tied it together at the end because ultimately our Savior is the one who paid for our sin in those areas. He kept the covenant even when we don't. His beard, as Isaiah 50 tells us, was pulled out for us. His blood was spilt for us so that we can find the rest that we're looking for, so we can find the acceptance we're looking for. Yeah, we covered all that stuff here. So which topic you want to go through, Dave?
Well, let's start with deceptive friends. So
All right.
this is a
Tobiah,
guy named
man.
Tobiah. I'll just read chapter 4, verse 3. It says, Tobiah the Ammonite said, "Yes, what are they building? If a fox goes up on it, he will break down their stone wall."
This is true. So this is back from chapter, what, 3 or 4?
Chapter 4 has Tobiah mocking
That's right.
Nehemiah and the people of
man.
God as they do this great work. And
Tobiah, he's just showing up multiple times earlier on.
Yep.
He's a troublemaker.
wreaking havoc.
Didn't they go back round too and go behind their backs and try to get the work disturbed
Yes.
in other ways?
Him-
Like he
him-
wasn't just mocking them; he was also sabotaging.
Oh,
them.
sabotaging.
He was. Well, he's going with that guy Sanballat, who Sanballat actually was in chapter 13. I just kind of skipped over that because it was another issue to deal with that in an already too long sermon was getting too long. So, but yes, Sanballat, Tobiah, they were trying to mess up the wall project.
So Nehemiah goes back, I guess, to Persia, to Susa, and then returns, and Tobiah's like hanging out in the temple. He's like sleeping in there.
He's living there.
So they have made friends with perhaps a compromising enemy there, and Nehemiah's fit to be tied. So he comes in and throws his
Clearly.
stuff on the lawn,
He throws his stuff out of the temple, right?
like get out, get
Done.
out, right?
Done.
Okay.
Hulk, smash!
Yes, definitely, yeah. So what's the modern application there?
Well, we talked a little bit about
how in the world.
Well, this was an interesting one, and you brought this up to me when we were doing the run through. So, like, what is the Tobiah in your temple? And it's not. It might be a person, but it also might not be a person. So we talked a little bit about, the sins of the flesh. I gave the examples of lust. Speaking of lust, I'm talking about porn before. Lust, gossip, envy. Those are things that can come into our lives and appear to be friendly, and they become a little familiar. They take up residence in our heart.
Not hurting anybody.
Not hurting anybody, right? Not
Just have a little
lust,
like a
gossip.
small room for Tobiah in my
Yeah,
temple.
that's
Like
right.
most of it is dedicated to God.
Well, maybe it starts with a small room, but then it keeps growing into a mansion in your heart, right? If you're not careful, because they make these promises that they sound really good, but what I thought was crazy, and I said this in the message, what I thought was crazy is sometimes those things we think. They make us angry because they make us feel shameful, but eventually, Timothy talks about your heart getting seared, and they become so comfortable that they just keep growing and growing and growing and causing
Out
more
of control.
Yeah, they cause more destruction.
So God, in His grace,
Throw them out.
yeah, sometimes,
Pick up your chair and toss it right now, Dave.
right. Sometimes the grace of God looks like a hard line, and sometimes we think about repentance like it's such an abrasive term. But really, when God drops the hammer and tears open the curtain and lifts the veil there, it's like, oh God, thank you so much for
Thank
that,
you, grace.
for letting
Yeah.
me just be chastened in this way and chucking Tobiah out of my life, because that was gonna grow. That problem is gonna wreck the plans that God has for me. So
Amen.
yeah. It's interesting. I'm also teaching the book of Joshua in adult education, and they're supposed to be casting out the Canaanites from the land, but they don't. So
Well, do they encounter the Ammonites in Joshua also? Or just mainly the Canaanites?
I have to go back and check. There's so many ites in that book.
Ites. There's a lot of ites.
Yeah, it's a good question. The mosquito bites. So anyway, they don't quite do the job. There's a little left in the major cities, and by the time you get to the book of Judges, this wreaks havoc. And Moses warned them, like, if you don't completely cleanse the land, these will become barbs in your eyes, and they will become thorns and thistles in your life. And so
That's interesting, right? Yeah, and they have the cleansing of the temple right here. I'm gonna cleanse the temple to remove the stench of Tobiah from it.
yeah.
I don't even want to smell him.
Well, I appreciated too what you said about the difference between a prescriptive command and a narrative command.
Yes, when you're doing narrative literature, that's important to recognize.
And what you just said about what is the actual metaphor for New Testament Christians who are not living in a theocracy, it doesn't mean go and throw out everybody out of, various political structures. It doesn't mean don't associate with people who are in the world. We're told actually to remain as lights within the world, and people in church leadership are actually needing to be spoken well of people who are not believers. So you have to know believers, and you have to know people who are not believers. But yeah, so like to keep it in that particular context, I liked the way you dealt with it. Just talking about how aggressive should we be about the temple of our hearts. that's the metaphor that we're looking
Yeah.
at in the New Testament.
Yeah, very much so.
So one of the other
Our bodies are a temple of the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
Paul tells us.
One of the other things in the news this week was Rosaria Butterfield did a talk at Liberty University, and I just want to read a quote from her about this as she talks about coming out of a lifestyle that was displeasing to God. She says this: "I learned to die to sin and to live in Christ, to ask help from other Christians, and to give sin no quarter." And then she says this: "Christians are called to starve sin and to mortify it, to cling to Christ and to grow in the grace of his knowledge, righteousness, and holiness." So I thought that's a really good tie-in to what we're talking about. This, we don't coddle Tobiah in our temple. We cast it out because God wants better for us than that.
To literally give it no quarter. That's the linguistic
Give it no quarter.
background to
There you
that.
go.
The quarters. He had quarters in the temple.
This is like, we need a linguist on our show
My
every
goodness.
week.
Can you come on every week? Regular
very insightful.
guest. My goodness.
Sure, I'll just fly back.
That's excellent.
Well, we can do Zoom. We figured out that echo issue from the other ones we did.
So that's the deceptive friends
All right.
thing.
So for the sake of time, maybe we should pick. I don't know what's the other one that you felt like was most interesting to talk about.
One more.
Yeah, probably one more.
Okay.
I mean, we can go on for a while. Maybe we'll do a whole separate, show on each of these.
Yeah. Well, it's the family one is
Okay.
on
All
my
right.
mind. So tell us a little bit
You're
about what was going on there.
always on my mind.
We'll be here all week, folks. So what was the
Thank you,
problem with the
Willie.
family situation?
Oh, okay.
Because
All
this
right,
is
well,
when the beards start getting pulled, right?
This is true. Yeah, the other two, finances and fatigue, are also very important. But I do think the family was let's say the straw that broke the camel's back for Nehemiah, and then he's cursing and getting a little violent. So the basic issue here was, if you go to slide 56, Nehemiah 13:23, "In those days also I saw the Jews had married the women of Ashdod, Ammon, and Moab." And this, in 57, this issue was the issue of spiritual intermarriage. So it's interesting, Faith, you were asking me about this because you said you were studying Malachi. And Malachi is a contemporary of Ezra and Nehemiah, who's speaking about the issue of divorce and marriage and things of that nature. The reason this was a big deal was because when the Jewish people, the people of God, were marrying these other ites that were around the area, they did not worship Yahweh God. And so what it was going to cause was a dividedness in the family where people were ultimately not going to follow after, the faith of the Israelites, the biblical faith, was not going to be passed on to the next generation.
Yeah, it wasn't racial; it was religious.
Yes, yeah, very much so. And we did make this point in the Ezra 10 sermon. Just if you were not here for that, it wasn't a racial thing; it was very much a spiritual thing. And of course, Ezra, as we talked about back then, had a little bit of a problematic response that kind of turned some heads. But yeah, here, so I think Nehemiah is saying just don't do it, right? Like, this is not a good thing. And slide 61 in verse 24, Nehemiah makes it pretty clear. He says, "Half their children spoke the language of Ashdod, and they could not speak the language of Judah, but only the language of each people." So that language was a big deal. And the point that I made, and I'll reemphasize, is that the faith was passed on orally in that time frame, which meant that if you did not speak Hebrew, you would not be able to understand and hear the scriptures as they were given at the time. And so the faith would be lost or not materialize, and it wouldn't be passed on. And this is why Nehemiah then is starting to, heads are rolling, because the line is not going to be preserved. This is going to cause a bunch of people to turn away from Christ, or from Yahweh God in the Old Testament. So it's a big deal. It's a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, what struck me here was that Nehemiah sees his entire life's work, purpose, and calling falling
That too.
apart.
Yep.
Like, wait a minute, I just dedicated like 20 years to this. We did a lot of stuff.
Yep.
Zerubbabel built the temple thing. Ezra
We think
came
about this
and
going back to what, like 75 years here.
It's a lot of work.
yeah,
But from Zerubbabel to Nehemiah, I mean, yeah.
right. And so the illustration you gave is a parent like saving for college, and then their kid flunks out, right? Like, so wait,
How far does 200 grand get me nowadays? They get me 4 years of college?
I
1
worked
year
my
of college?
whole life. That's another podcast. So, I mean, the Lord provides. So
Yes.
we're making it. Michaela, another semester taken care. So I
Hopefully
mean,
she did okay this semester.
yeah, that's his life's work, being almost like going up in smoke, so to speak. And this was his calling from God. I mean,
Yeah.
back then it was about, a wall was about a preserved city protection. It was about them being able to have jurisdiction. If you didn't have this work, then any band of raiders or marauders could come in and wreak havoc. So this was important to preserve what God was doing through the people of Israel and his promised Messiah.
Yes.
And to see that work starting to crumble, starting to disintegrate, and having an intermarriage spiritually with other peoples was to bring them back to the state that they were at pre-exile and perhaps risk the judgment of God coming upon them once again.
Yeah.
So no wonder Nehemiah's a little Hulk smash in this moment, and that he's fearful that all that they have worked so hard to accomplish is falling apart right in front of his eyes.
Yeah, very much so.
Well, and you referenced that refrain over and over that I love, the one where he says, remember what I've tried to do, God, remember me. And it reminded me of, I think it's Psalm 108, or I'm really bad with, it's the one that Moses is saying, establish the works of our hands so that we may gain a heart of wisdom. And there's
Psalm
this-
90.
Psalm 90.
Yeah. Oh, very
Establish the work
I
of
knew
our hands.
someone
Yes,
would know.
Establish the work of our hands.
Yeah, and isn't that what...
You preached on it over the summer, so.
It's oh, good.
Yeah.
It's wonderful, and I love that about that refrain that I'd never noticed that. How there's a desperation. That's why he is so upset. He's like, I've tried so hard. I've spent my life doing this, and you guys are just, you know.
Well, and that's we were talking yesterday about literary devices. I mean, a lot of times if you read the Hebrew, there's a lot of repetition. You know, repetition over and over again of concepts because he knows that people forget what they're supposed to be doing. So,
Remember me.
remember. Yeah, he's
So-
saying remember us for all that we've done. Also, remember me and help me, Lord, to do this confronting in a way that people are going to turn back to you.
It's a posture of dependence, isn't it? He knows that as much as he's done so much work to do this, he really does need God to intervene and remember him and to establish all that he's done. So good message.
Good, thanks. Well, do you mind just really quickly, I can summarize because we mentioned that other article that I brought up. So one of the applications that I gave, and this is sort of a cultural topic, is the issue of the homeschooling that's going on. So if you want to put this up, slide 2, Tim, the Washington Post, and this is the Washington Times, but the Washington Post wrote an article, which I don't buy it, so it's behind a paywall. I couldn't get a screenshot. The Washington Post wrote an article that basically said that homeschooling is this fringe movement that's now kind of gaining traction. And I was listening to a report this week that I think homeschooling has jumped up like 51% or something like that, which comparatively is so much higher than some of the other school choices. And again, this is not to comment on what choices people have made as far as education, but it's an interesting observation that a lot of people are wanting to do this now. And part of the reason, I think, is at least that parents want to have a bigger say in what their kids are getting taught. And that's not just Christians. I think that's Christians and even non-Christians that are there's this kind of this wave nowadays of this, where back in the 90s when I was growing up, the 80s and 90s, it was really this little fringe, Christian thing. And now it's kind of a bigger deal, and there's a lot of things to talk about with there. But the point that I was making in the sermon is that this whole idea of the language and sharing the language with your kids, the language of scriptures, it's your responsibility to, as best you can, try to pass on a biblical worldview to your kids, to teach them the language of the scriptures and not be so caught up in the secular language of the world, the idea of memorizing Taylor Swift songs versus memorizing the Bible. That's always convicting to me. You could do both, but my point is more often than not, people know.
No quarter.
I like Taylor Swift.
All right. So anyway, that's my point. Why don't we leave it there?
Very good. No offense, Taylor. All right. So we are at the part of our show where we talk about theology, right, Tim?
Yes.
Are we going to try to sprint today? Or are we too tired? Is it too early to sprint?
We're gonna attempt to use our fast twitch brain cells and sprint really fast.
Speaking of
That's
running,
Twitch. That's right. Speaking of Ronnie,
dear
Johnny,
friend, is Johnny alive?
I don't.
I
Tim,
heard there
Tim was
like,
telling me the way
So-
he said he finished the marathon, but he was in bad shape
Shout
for a little
out,
bit afterwards.
shout out, Johnny. Johnny
I
tackled the Philadelphia
I
Marathon.
would not be in work today.
Dang.
I would not.
And he,
I would be still lying on the shores of the Schuylkill River.
I'd still be
I think.
walking the 26 miles. Like I'd still be like, "Hey, Dave, where's Dave? He's like a mile marker 12."
Stopping by.
What my
Anyway.
brother Ben and I said is Johnny Graves conquered the Philadelphia Marathon, but about 5 minutes after the Philadelphia Marathon conquered Johnny.
My goodness,
bro.
what was that feel like? His legs and everything was just.
For Johnny's sake, I won't go into the details. But
man.
he's I have it on good authority that he's feeling better this morning. So
Okay.
he's
All
kind of a beast. So I'm sure
It's
he'll be
very
fine.
Well,
impressive
it's
that he made
interesting.
it.
He had requested
Yes.
the whole week off this week, probably in anticipation that he would need to just lie in bed for several
he
days.
did. Okay.
He did. He's out this week.
All
so.
right, well-
Hey, all right, come on, give us the sprint.
So shout out Johnny. But in an era
We've
of
just finished a marathon right now, so we might be panting through the sprint.
in an era of rapidly changing family structures, so perfect
Ooh.
timing. How should
Throw Tobiah out of the temple.
How should the church approach issues such as divorce, remarriage, and alternative family arrangements, maintaining biblical principles while showing compassion to those facing complex life situations?
Oh man, Tim, that's a big topic right there.
Is this your question or ChatGPT or what?
Theology smash.
Wow.
Can you read it one more time? I'm
Sure.
trying to wrap my. You're putting together a lot of different topics there.
Essentially,
Where ChatGPT
how should the
is.
church approach issues such as divorce, remarriage, and alternative family arrangements, maintaining biblical principles while also showing compassion to those facing those complex life situations?
Then we tag team that one. You want me to kick
Sure.
it off, and maybe you jump in there with some nuances on that?
Sure.
Yeah.
And Faith, feel free to
Yeah.
sprint along.
So
here.
the whole go with it, we try to get this down to like a 60-second type of thing, so you can only say so much. I think we might have been going longer recently. All right. So anyway, what I would say about the topic of family in the culture today, family is hugely important, and I think we should be people who fight for the family structure, husband and wife, raising kids as much as possible. At the same time, we do recognize that we live in a fallen world where sin happens. Things are broken, and we do need grace to come in. The topic of divorce and remarriage, I mean, there is Scripture speaks to issues of divorce. Remarriage is a little bit more complicated, and we should think about those things very much deeply. But the goal would be to create strong families, ultimately who are raising kids in the faith, and I think the best way to seek to avoid divorce as much as you can is to do a lot of work up front, which some folks are not doing nowadays. So
Yeah, I guess I would just add to that the Scripture is clear in the foundational book of Genesis that marriage was created by God. It's one man, one woman for life, and that's the ideal. When asked about that ideal, Jesus himself upheld the ideal. But the interesting
Matthew
thing
19.
about the Lord Jesus is he both upheld the ideal and he did not condemn those who fell short either. He offered grace and mercy and compassion towards those who have made some difficult choices or made some bad decisions around this area, and offered mercy for those who need mercy. So I think we need to do the same. We need to uphold the ideal, and we need to be careful about condemning those who fall short, because grace and mercy is there. I would also say that marriage is an important ideal for the flourishing of society. There's
Yes.
an old African proverb that says, before you tear a fence down, why don't you find out why it was put up in the first place? And so there's some things that marriage creates, a structure that marriage creates around the covenant that is protective of society. And I think we need to teach about the benefits and the value of being in a covenant relationship between one man and one woman as well.
It is also important when you're talking to an audience that has experienced various levels of divorce. Jesus said that divorce is permitted by Moses because of the hardness of your hearts. It does not mean that the person who divorces has a hard heart. It can mean that there is a different kind of sin that has entered into the covenant relationship and ruptured the covenant, and therefore the divorce is only demonstrating that the covenant is already broken. When you look at that passage where it says God hates divorce, what it actually says is God hates the man who divorces his wife and takes another. He commits violence on her. And so it's very important to just mention, if you have been divorced, there's a stigma sometimes that people bear, but it does not mean that they were divorced in a way that was not honoring to God, because God loves the person and marriage is important to him, but the person is more important.
Absolutely. But it also could be because the person did have a hard heart, right?
100%,
We can allow for that
100%.
as well.
No,
The
I was just
exception is there.
counterbalancing because you guys hit the other one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
We hit it pretty hard. So thank you for
100%.
thank you for the counterbalance there. That's helpful. Yeah.
I think we did that pretty good in 2 minutes. What do you think?
If you want more resources on this, there's some messages about marriage and divorce up on the website from our 1 Corinthians series,
Yeah.
Detoxicity. So
do
check
you do
that
that
out.
every week? I can't believe y'all put yourselves through that.
There's
I was
a
like, how do you
lot
cover that topic?
Of anxiety around this segment of the Behind the Pulpit. Yeah. It's a way to wake ourselves up in the
This is
morning.
Tim's fault. We blame Tim for this.
It was your idea to have this
believe-
segment on the show, Bob.
Okay.
I just embrace it
Look at
full-heartedly.
Bob.
Smash.
Wow.
Yeah. You can relax. It's over now, Faith.
Okay, that was so stressful. I was like, this is a very delicate
Yeah.
topic.
Can we go back to cheese
They're
sticks?
not always delicate like that.
Duncan.
Tim just threw in the
Okay, I was like, I don't know how you live like that.
How do you people live
Sometimes it's like, are dinosaurs real?
Okay, that was, yeah, sure.
This one might get you. Your
Very
Trinity one
good.
got a lot of views. We'll see if this one gets some views.
All right. Well, thank you guys for tuning in to Behind the Pulpit. We look forward to being with you next time. And Faith, special thank you to you for joining us on the show today. Thank you for the good work that you're doing. It is an honor and a joy and a privilege to partner with you as you follow God and be about his good work with us. So,
Thank you guys.
All right.
God bless you. Have a good day.
Have a good Thanksgiving.